Well, I've got here the actual original brace that this letter was responsive to. So you say that the brace changed, and so you had to implement this rule. Are you telling me that this brace is exempt from your rule? You're not exempting the same brace that you gave this letter to.
If the brace is submitted, we'll classify it.
It's pretty obvious you're misleading people here when you say that the brace has changed, because your rule affects the braces that didn't change. You tell us here today how many people have complied by registering this product.
I believe it's a statutory maximum of 10 years.
10 years for owning a piece of plastic that you were told was legal?
The court's ruling. In a significant legal decision, the Supreme Court has ruled that the ATF overstepped its regulatory authority concerning arm control measures, specifically regarding the controversial pistol brace rule. The court's decision underscores that the ATF acted arbitrarily and capriciously by reversing a decade-long policy without sufficient explanation or notice, impacting individuals and businesses who had relied on the agency's previous stance. For nearly 10 years, the ATF maintained that attaching a stabilizing brace to an arm did not alter the arm's classification under the National Firearms Act. Stabilizing braces were originally designed to help disabled shooters more easily and accurately fire pistols. The ATF's consistent position allowed these devices to be widely used without subjecting the firearms to stricter NFA regulations, which include more rigorous registration and tax requirements. In 2023, the ATF issued a final rule that reversed its long-standing policy on stabilizing braces. This new rule reclassified arms with attached stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles, thus bringing them under the NFA's stringent regulatory regime. This change effectively criminalized the possession of millions of previously lawful firearms unless they were registered under the NFA. The Supreme Court's ruling lambasted the ATF for its sudden policy shift, emphasizing that the agency failed to provide a reasonable explanation for its new position. The court noted it would be arbitrary and capricious to ignore such matters, but this is exactly what defendants did when they inexplicably and fundamentally switched their position on stabilizing braces without providing sufficient explanations and notice. The court found that the ATF had not adequately considered the serious reliance interests that had developed over the years due to the agency's previous stance. The ruling referenced the principle that when a federal agency changes a long-standing policy, it must account for the reliance interests that the old policy engendered. This requirement is rooted in administrative law principles that aim to ensure fairness and predictability in regulatory actions. The court cited the Department of Homeland Security versus Regents of the University of California case, which highlighted the need for agencies to consider the reliance interests of those affected by their policy changes. Court overturns ATF firearm rule. In a significant setback for President Joe Biden's efforts to regulate attack weapons, a federal court has ruled against the administration's attempt to control and tax AR-15-style pistols. The Texas-based U.S. District Court delivered a 12-page decision vacating the rule, which could have led to the destruction of millions of arms and the jailing of owners who did not comply.
This is what offends the sensibilities of Americans, whether they own these or not. Do these increase the muzzle velocity?
The stabilizing
Do these allow the... You're not answering any of the question.
Rule.
Do you think you have the authority to reclassify the firearm above because it can be shouldered?
Give classifications, and if things don't qualify under the rule, then they don't qualify.
The court criticized the ATF for abruptly changing a long-standing exemption, thereby making the ownership of these firearms illegal overnight. This ruling came in the case of Mock versus Garland, which was championed by the Firearms Policy Coalition. The FPC summarized the decision in layman's terms, accusing the ATF of overreach and celebrating the court's rejection of the pistol brace rule. Previously, the same court had upheld the ATF rule, but this decision was overturned by an appeals court. The district court judge concurred with the appeals court, declaring the ATF rule illegal and predicting it would be rejected by other courts as well. The case is expected to advance to the U.S. Supreme Court. For now, it remains legal to own AR-style pistols equipped with stabilizing arm braces. These braces, which were initially approved by the ATF, can be used as a type of stock, effectively turning pistols into short-barreled rifles. Short-barreled rifles are subject to stringent regulations under the National Firearms Act, requiring a $200 tax stamp and registration. However, the ATF's recent rule aimed to regulate these braced pistols similarly to short-barreled rifles, despite having previously allowed them. Judge Reed O'Connor, in his ruling, stated that the ATF had erred by changing its stance without providing a sufficient explanation. He also criticized the agency for ignoring user comments and drafting the rule in a vague manner. The court finds that the adaptation of the final rule was arbitrary and capricious for two reasons. First, the defendants did not provide a detailed justification for their reversal of the agency's long-standing position. And second, the final rule's standards are impermissibly vague, wrote the judge. The ruling affects an estimated 10 million or more arms in the U.S. During an ATF grace period that allowed owners to register their weapons without paying the $200 tax, fewer than 300,000 did so. These arms are popular for recreational shooting at ranges and for self-defense because they are more compact than traditional AR-15 rifles. Many feature barrels about half the length of a standard rifle, and the adjustable pistol brace stocks add to their versatility. The Biden administration justified the rule by asserting that these arms were often chosen for mass slayings, although they have only been used in a few such incidents. This argument did not convince the court, which focused on the procedural missteps and lack of clarity in the ATF's rule change. The decision not only preserves the legality of these arms, but also sends a strong message about the limits of regulatory authority. The court's ruling emphasizes that federal agencies cannot arbitrarily reverse long-standing policies without thorough justification and consideration of the reliance interests that have developed over time. This insistence on regulatory stability ensures that individuals and businesses are not unfairly impacted by sudden changes in policy. Moreover, this decision sets a significant legal precedent, likely influencing future cases involving abrupt policy shifts by federal agencies. The court's demand for detailed explanations and transparent rulemaking processes could lead to more cautious and well-considered regulatory actions in the future. For arm owners and Second Amendment advocates, the ruling is a major victory, preventing the imposition of stricter regulations on firearms equipped with stabilizing braces. It also serves as a rebuke to the ATF's regulatory practices, potentially curbing the agency's ability to implement similar regulations without adhering to proper administrative procedures. As the case potentially heads to the Supreme Court, it remains a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over arm control and regulatory authority in the United States. This ruling underscores the importance of due process and the rule of law in the formulation and implementation of federal regulations. Implications of the decision. The Supreme Court's decision to nullify the pistol brace rule carries profound implications for regulatory stability. The ruling underscores that federal agencies cannot whimsically alter long-standing policies without substantial justification and consideration of the reliance interests that have developed over time. This emphasis on consistency and predictability in regulatory actions ensures that individuals and businesses are not unfairly disadvantaged by sudden policy shifts. By mandating that agencies provide thorough explanations for their actions, the court has reinforced the importance of transparency and accountability in federal rulemaking. In addition to promoting regulatory stability, the decision sets a significant legal precedent. Future cases involving abrupt policy changes by federal agencies are likely to face more rigorous judicial scrutiny. The court's insistence on a thorough justification for policy reversals signals that federal agencies must meticulously consider the impacts of their decisions and provide clear, rational explanations. This precedent may lead to a more cautious approach by agencies when contemplating significant policy changes, ensuring that they are well-founded and justifiable. For arm owners and Second Amendment advocates, the ruling represents a major victory. By preventing the imposition of stricter regulations on arms equipped with stabilizing braces, the decision safeguards the rights of lawful arm owners. Stabilizing braces, initially designed to aid disabled shooters, have become widely used. The court's decision preserves the legal status of these devices, allowing arm owners to continue using them without the burdensome regulations associated with short-barreled rifles under the National Firearms Act. The ruling also has a notable impact on the ATF's regulatory practices. By overturning the pistol brace rule, the court has effectively rebuked the ATF for overstepping its authority. This decision is likely to curb the agency's ability to implement similar regulations in the future without adhering to proper administrative procedures. The ATF will need to ensure that any significant policy changes are accompanied by thorough justifications and a careful consideration of the reliance interests affected. This ruling serves as a reminder to all federal agencies of the importance of procedural rigor and accountability in their rulemaking processes. Reactions and commentary. The ruling has garnered mixed reactions. Arm rights advocates have celebrated the decision as a protection of Second Amendment rights and a check on regulatory overreach. They argue that the ATF's abrupt policy change was an unfair imposition on lawful arm owners and businesses. On the other hand, arm control advocates have expressed concern that the ruling undermines efforts to regulate arms that they believe should be subject to stricter controls due to their potential lethality. They argue that stabilizing braces effectively turn pistols into short-barreled rifles, which are more dangerous and should be regulated accordingly. The Supreme Court's decision to invalidate the ATF's pistol brace rule is a landmark ruling with far-reaching implications for regulatory practices and Second Amendment rights. By emphasizing the need for federal agencies to provide clear justifications for policy changes and to consider the reliance interests of those affected, the court has reinforced principles of fairness and predictability in administrative law. This ruling not only impacts the regulation of arms, but also sets a precedent for how federal agencies must conduct themselves when altering long-standing policies. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.